Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're not just looking at a single article or, a trending news story. We're looking at something more like a rescue mission.
That's a strong way to put it.
Well, I have a stack of reports here on the desk.
Yeah.
It's heavy enough to be a doorstop. We've got the Growth Plan MedTech. We have strategy documents from top university medical centers in the Netherlands, global outlooks, the works.
A lot of reading.
A lot of reading.
Mm-hmm.
And when you layer them all up, you don't get this shiny picture of a futuristic hospital with, robots serving tea.
Not at all.
You get a picture of a system that is blinking red.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about medtech, medical technology, but not just the gadgets. We're talking about the strategic imperative to keep our healthcare system from collapsing under its own weight.
It's a pleasure to be here. And honestly, rescue mission isn't too strong a phrase.
Really?
If you look at the demographic data in the Growth Plan, the math it stops working. We are moving into a period that the sources call the double gray pressure.
Double gray pressure.
It's a term that keeps coming up in the Dutch policy documents, and it is the context for, well, everything we're going to discuss today.
That sounds ominous. Break that down for me. I'm assuming gray refers to aging.
Exactly. But it's a two-front war, you see. So pressure one is the demand side.
Okay.
We all know the population is aging, but it's not just that people are getting older. It's that they are living longer with chronic conditions, multimorbidity.
Right, so it's not just one thing wrong with them.
Not anymore. A patient walking into a hospital today doesn't just have heart disease. They have heart disease and diabetes and maybe early-stage dementia. The complexity of care for each patient is it's skyrocketing.
So that's the demand.
That's pressure one. Demand is up, and it's much more complex.
Okay, so what's pressure two?
Pressure two is the supply side, the workforce. We are facing a historic contraction in the number of hands available to deliver that care.
We hear about nurse shortages all the time.
We do, but the scale is immense. The sources estimate a global shortfall of millions of nurses by 2030. In the Netherlands specifically, the data is stark.
How stark?
We're looking at a scenario where if we don't change anything, if we keep the current way of working, 1 in 4 people in the entire workforce would need to work in healthcare.
1 in 4.
1 in 4, just to maintain the standards we have now.
That's economically impossible. You can't run a society like that. Who would bake the bread? Who would build the roads?
Precisely. It is structurally impossible. And that right there, that is the perfect storm. You have this exploding complex demand crashing headlong into a shrinking, exhausted workforce.
So the system is at its limit.
The consensus in these documents is absolute. We have maxed out the human efficiency model. You can't ask the nurses to run faster.
They're already running.
You can't ask the surgeons to skip lunch breaks. They already are.
So the whole work harder strategy is dead. We can't just efficiency squeeze our way out of this with human labor.
It's dead. And that leaves us with only one variable we can actually change.
The tools.
The tools. That is the medtech imperative. It's not about buying cool robots because they look futuristic. It's about the fact that if we don't automate, digitize, and streamline the care process, the system breaks. MedTech is the capacity multiplier.
Okay, that sets the stakes incredibly high. This isn't just about industry. It's about the survival of the social contract on health.
It really is.
But before we get into the how, the robots and the AI, I want to be very, very clear on the what.
A good place to start.
I feel like medtech is one of those terms that gets thrown around in policy meetings and, half the room thinks you mean Pfizer and the other half thinks you mean an Apple Watch.
That's a very common confusion.
So what are we actually talking about?
The sources, specifically the MedTech Definity document, draw a very sharp line here. People often conflate MedTech with pharma or biotech, but they are distinct worlds. Pharma and biotech are primarily about chemistry and biology. They are about developing drugs, to cure diseases at a cellular or molecular level. A vaccine is pharma. An antibiotic is pharma.
Okay. And medtech.
MedTech is about the technology, the devices, and the services that support the entire care cycle. It is engineering applied to health. And the scope, it's massive. It covers prevention, diagnosis, monitoring, treatment, and rehabilitation.
So give me the range, because
Yeah.
I think people just imagine huge MRI machines.
It goes from the incredibly simple to the incredibly complex. A sticking plaster is MedTech.
A plaster, really?
Absolutely. Spectacles in MedTech, a wheelchair is MedTech, but
Yeah.
so is a surgical robot, a pacemaker, an MRI scanner, and the AI software that's used to interpret X-rays.
I see.
If it's a device or a technology used to intervene or support care, it's MedTech.
So if I take a pill, that's pharma. If I get a hip replacement or has my heart rate monitored by a sensor, that's medtech.
Precisely. And in terms of scale, it is an economic powerhouse. The European medtech market is estimated at around 170 billion euros.
Wow.
That makes it the second largest market in the world, just behind the United States. So, for the policymakers listening, we are talking about a sector that is vital not just for health, but for the entire European economy.
A massive employer.
And a massive generator of value.
That is a huge number. But here's where I get skeptical.
Go on.
If we have this huge market and we have this desperate need for labor-saving technology, why does it feel like hospitals are still running on fax machines and paperwork?
That is the million-dollar question.
Why aren't we seeing these innovations everywhere? I mean, I read about these breakthroughs in the paper, but when I go to my GP, it feels like 1995.
Now we are getting to the heart of the matter. This brings us to what the industry calls the Valley of Death.
The Valley of Death sounds dramatic.
It is dramatic for the companies trying to cross it. The source material highlights a really hard, uncomfortable truth. It can take up to 17 years for a medical innovation to successfully go from an idea in a university lab.
17 years.
17 years to full-scale market adoption.
That's almost a generation. In the tech world, 17 years is the difference between the first iPhone and, I don't know, the iPhone 18.
Exactly.
Why on earth is medical innovation moving in such slow motion?
It's frustrating, isn't it? But you have to view that 17 years as a gauntlet. It's not just one hurdle, it's a series of valleys. The first is what they call the translation gap.
The translation gap.
So you have a brilliant researcher at a place like TU Delft or Twente. They invent a new sensor. It works perfectly on the lab bench.
Right, in a controlled environment.
But turning that into a prototype that can actually be manufactured at scale with medical-grade materials, that's a completely different skill set. Many projects die right there because the university lab isn't a factory.
Okay, but let's say they survive that. They build a prototype, they have a working device. What's next?
Then they hit the clinical evidence valley, and this is where the terrain has shifted dramatically in Europe recently. We need to talk about the MDR.
I saw this acronym all over the strategy docs. MDR and IVDR. It sounds like bureaucratic alphabet soup.
It can feel that way.
So what is it, and why is everyone panicking about it?
To understand the pain here, you have to understand the history. We used to operate under something called the MDD, the Medical Device Directive.
Huh?
It was, well, let's say it was a bit more flexible.
Flexible.
But after some high-profile safety scandals, think of the breast implant issues a few years back where industrial silicone was used instead of medical grade.
I remember that. It was awful.
It was. So Europe decided, quite rightly, that patient safety had to be tightened.
Which, on the face of it, sounds completely reasonable.
Yeah.
We all want safe implants.
We absolutely do. I don't want industrial silicone in my body. But the pendulum swung very, very hard.
How so?
The MDR, the medical device regulation, which replaced the MDD, requires significantly more clinical data. And here is the kicker. It requires this data not just for new cutting-edge devices, but for existing ones too.
Wait. So even if a device has been used safely in hospitals for 10 years, the company has to go back and reprove it?
In many cases, yes. They have to generate new clinical data for what they call legacy devices. And this created a massive bottleneck.
A bottleneck.
The agencies that certify these devices, they're called notified bodies, were completely overwhelmed.
Right.
Imagine every car on the road suddenly needing to retake its MOT or inspection at the same time, but there are half as many mechanics available.
That sounds like a recipe for chaos.
It is chaos. The waiting lists for certification stretched to 18 months, sometimes 2 years, and the cost just skyrocketed.
And if you're a startup with limited cash, 2 years is a lifetime.
2 years of waiting is a death sentence. You burn through your funding before you can sell a single unit. But it's even worse for some of the older, cheaper devices.
What do you mean?
The sources mention that companies are actually pulling essential products from the market.
Pulling them.
Yes. Things like specific catheters or surgical tools, because the cost of recertifying them under the new rules is higher than the profit they will ever make from them.
That is the law of unintended consequences, striking hard.
Yeah.
We write rules to make things safer, and the result is we lose access to the tools we actually need.
Exactly. And it's causing what they call a flight of innovation.
That's right.
European companies are looking at this backlog and saying, you know what? We'll launch in the U.S. first. The FDA process in America is tough, don't get me wrong, but it is centralized and it's predictable.
So our own innovations are helping American patients years before they help European patients.
That's the frustrating
So
reality.
we have the translation gap, we have this regulatory swamp. Is there another valley?
There is the funding gap, and this is a very specific European problem.
Okay.
We are actually quite good at funding the early stage, the seed stage. Government grants, university spin-off funds, that part of the system works reasonably well.
So getting the idea off the ground is possible.
Yes, but once you need to scale up, when you need 20 or 50 or 100 million euros to build a factory, run a massive international trial, and build a sales force, that money is almost non-existent in Europe compared to the US.
Why? Do European investors just hate money?
It's a risk appetite issue.
Yeah.
And a structural one. The Growth Plan document highlights that Europe attracts only about 5% of global venture capital funding for this sector.
Only 5%. And the U.S.?
52%.
52. That's a staggering difference.
It is. European VCs tend to be more conservative. They look at the MDR delays we just talked about. They look at the fragmented European market where you have to negotiate price with every single country separately. And they just say, too risky.
So we have the brains, we have the research, but we don't have the capital to grow the businesses.
We are, in effect, a brilliant incubator for the American market.
We're exporting our best ideas.
That is the harsh reality. We're exporting our intellectual property because the capital to build the companies is somewhere else.
Okay, that is a sobering reality check. We have the demographics working against us, that double grade pressure. We have a regulatory maze that's choking off supply.
Yeah.
And we have a funding drought.
It's a tough picture.
But, and this is a big but, the innovation is still happening.
It is. And despite the gloom we just painted, the potential is staggering.
The sources for this deep dive are absolutely packed with examples of what is possible when things do go right. So, I want to pivot now. Let's go on a tour of this innovation.
Do it.
The Growth Plan and the university profiles, they paint a picture of a future healthcare system that looks very different from today. And I want to structure this by looking at how these technologies solve that central problem we started with, capacity.
That's the right lens.
Yeah.
How does this technology buy us time and hands?
Exactly. Let's start at the beginning. Diagnosis, finding out what is wrong. The sources talk a lot about a shift from detecting sick people to predicting illness.
Yes.
And they highlight artificial intelligence and imaging as a key part of that.
This is a prime example of the capacity multiplier. A specific case study here comes from the University Medical Center Groningen, the UMCG, and radiomics. They are working on autonomous MRI systems.
Autonomous MRI. That sounds like a self-driving car, but for scanning your insides, is that safe? I mean, I'm not sure I want a robot deciding if I have a tumor.
That's the natural reaction. But let's look at the bottleneck today. An MRI is a fantastic machine,
Incredibly detailed images.
but it is slow, it is loud, and crucially, it requires highly specialized staff radiographers to position the patient, set the protocols, run the scan, and then it requires a radiologist, a highly paid specialist doctor, to stare at hundreds of images and write a report.
And those are exactly the people we're running out of.
Exactly. So the innovation here isn't just about better pictures, it's about automation.
Okay.
The autonomous MRI uses AI and sensors to position the patient automatically. It selects the right scanning protocol based on the patient's data. It scans faster. This means you can run more patients per day with fewer staff.
So that handles the taking the picture part.
Yeah.
What about reading it?
That's where radiomics is doing incredible work, particularly in breast cancer screening.
Right.
In many systems, mammograms are read by 2 radiologists to ensure accuracy. It's a process called double reading.
A safety check.
Precisely. Radboud is developing and validating AI models that can effectively replace the second reader.
So the human doctor still checks, but the AI is the safety net.
Precisely. Or another way to look at it is the AI filters out the 80% of scans that are clearly normal, which lets the human doctor focus their limited energy and expertise on the 20% that are suspicious.
You're not replacing the doctor.
You are removing the hay so they can find the needle. You are, in effect, doubling their capacity.
And I imagine this helps with the prediction aspect too.
Hugely. If MRIs are cheaper, faster, and require less staff, you can use them more proactively. You could scan people before they have symptoms.
Right.
You could catch cardiovascular issues or neurodegenerative diseases years earlier. And treating a disease early is always less labor-intensive than treating it when it's a crisis.
That makes perfect sense. Prevention is the ultimate labor saver. Okay, let's move from finding the problem to fixing it. Theme 2. Treatment and intervention.
Okay.
And this is where I saw some really sci-fi terms like the intervention room of the future.
This is flagship 2 in the Growth Plan. The shift here is from open surgery, cutting a patient open to minimally invasive precision. And the Netherlands is a world leader here.
Minimally invasive precision. Unpack that. What does it actually look like for the patient?
To see that reality, you have to look at what's happening in Rotterdam at Erasmus MC and in Utrecht. Think about the old way of doing heart surgery.
Right.
You crack the chest, you stop the heart, you do the repair, you sew them up. It's effective, but it's traumatic. The recovery takes months. It occupies an ICU bed for days.
It's a massive assault on the body.
The new paradigm is different. Imagine a catheter, a thin tube inserted into a vein in your leg. The surgeon guides this tube all the way up to your heart. But here is the kicker. They aren't doing it blind. They are surrounded by screens showing real-time 3D imaging of the inside of your heart while they work.
So they are navigating a video game, essentially, but inside a living person.
A very, very high-stakes video game. And this is where that concept of convergence we talked about comes in.
Right.
At the Thorax Center in Rotterdam, they realized that to build better tools for this, you couldn't just have doctors guessing what they needed. They brought the engineers from the Technical University of Delft into the hospital.
Physically into the building.
Physically into the scrubs. You have engineers standing next to cardiologists during procedures. The engineer sees the surgeon struggling to maneuver a catheter around a difficult curve in the artery and says, wait, if we changed the material stiffness right here or added a steerable tip there, you could do that in 10 seconds instead of 10 minutes.
So they are iterating the design in the environment where it's actually used.
Exactly.
That seems so obvious, but I guess usually engineers are in a lab miles away.
They are. And the result is what they call first time right. If you have a catheter that fits perfectly in imaging that shows you exactly where the blockage is, you don't make mistakes. You don't damage surrounding tissue. The procedure takes 45 minutes instead of 4 hours.
And to bring it back to our capacity theme, that patient isn't in the ICU for a week.
They might be home the next day, and that is how you solve the nurse shortage. Not by hiring more nurses, because they don't exist, but by needing fewer days of nursing care per patient.
Efficiency through precision.
That's it. It's better for the patient, obviously, but it's also the only way the system can survive.
I love that concept. Now let's move to something that sounds even more futuristic. Theme 3, regenerative medtech.
A fascinating field.
We are moving from replacing parts to regrowing them.
This is a huge shift. We often think of medtech as metal and plastic artificial hips, titanium knees, pacemakers, but the future is biological. Maastricht UMC Plus and their Merlin Institute are doing just groundbreaking work here.
What are they building?
They are working on smart implants, or scaffolds. Imagine you have a large bone defect, maybe from a tumor removal or a bad accident.
Okay.
Traditionally, we'd put in a metal rod or a permanent plastic spacer. It stays there forever, it can get infected, it can wear out.
And the body never really accepts it, right? It just sort of tolerates.
Exactly. Maastricht is developing 3D printed scaffolds made of a material that is biodegradable. They print a structure that looks like the bone you are missing. They implant it.
And then what happens?
The scaffold is designed to encourage your own cells to grow into it. It creates a home for your bone cells, and as your bone grows back, the scaffold slowly dissolves.
That is incredible. So eventually the device is gone, and you are just left with you, your own tissue.
Yes, it's helping the body heal itself. No permanent foreign object, no long-term rejection risk. It's just you.
And there was another example in this category that blew my mind. Organ on a chip. So this was from Leiden, right? The LUMC.
Yes, led by Professor Christine Mummery. This is addressing a different problem. The staggering inefficiency of drug testing.
Organ on a chip. It sounds like a computer part.
It looks a bit like one. It's a microfluidic chip, a small piece of plastic with tiny channels running through it.
Okay.
But those channels are lined with living human cells that mimic the function of an organ. You can have a heart on a chip that actually beats. You can have a lung on a chip that breathes.
That's amazing, but what's the point? Why do we need a tiny plastic heart?
Think about how we test drugs today. We start with cells in a petri dish, then we move to animals, mice, usually.
Right.
But a mouse is not a human. A drug might work perfectly in a mouse and be toxic to a human, or, more often, it works in a mouse and does absolutely nothing in a human. We waste billions on drugs that fail in late-stage trials.
And I assume the ethical issues with animal testing are significant too.
Massive. We all want to reduce animal testing. Organ on a chip allows us to do that. But it goes even further. It allows for personalized medicine. Let's say you have a patient with a specific genetic heart condition. You can take their stem cells, grow their specific heart tissue on a chip, and then test different drugs on it.
On their own cells.
On their own cells. You can see if a drug will be toxic to that specific individual before you ever give them the pill.
So you make the mistakes on the chip, not on the patient.
Exactly. It saves lives, it saves money on ineffective treatments, and it accelerates the development of new cures. It really shows how medtech isn't just one thing. It's biology, it's engineering, it's data. It is the convergence of all of them.
Okay, one last stop on our tour. We've diagnosed with AI, we've treated with robots, we've regenerated with scaffolds. But eventually the patient has to leave the hospital.
Or ideally, never come in.
Or better yet, yes, we want to keep them from coming to the hospital in the first place.
Yeah.
This brings us to theme 4, remote care.
This is Flagship 1 in the GROW Plan, the hospital at home and regional command centers.
Command centers. I'm picturing NASA, mission control, lots of screens.
That is the intended vibe. Think of it like air traffic control for health. The idea is to fundamentally change where care happens.
Okay.
Currently, our system is reactive. We wait for a patient to feel sick. They call an ambulance. They come to the ER. We admit them. It's expensive. It's stressful. And it fills up those scarce beds.
And often, by the time they come in, the problem is already severe.
Right. The alternative is continuous monitoring. LUMC has a project called The Box, and Erasmus and Radboud are doing similar things with heart and Parkinson's patients.
How does it work?
You give the patient a kit of wearables, blood pressure monitors, heart rate sensors, smart scales. They go home, they go about their life.
And the data goes to the command center.
Yes. A central team monitors hundreds of patients remotely. The data streams in. Algorithms watch for trends. The hospital only intervenes when the data shows a problem developing.
Such as?
A spike in blood pressure, an irregular heart rhythm, a sudden weight gain that indicates fluid retention in a heart failure patient.
So you catch the heart attack before it happens.
Or you adjust the medication remotely so the heart attack never happens. It prevents unnecessary checkups because you don't need to come in just to have your blood pressure taken. But more importantly, it prevents emergency admissions.
It keeps the stable patients out of the hospital.
Saving those resources for the truly acute cases.
It seems so obvious when you say it. Why keep someone in a hospital bed, which costs thousands of euros a night, just to watch a monitor when the monitor can be in their living room?
The technology is there. The challenge, as always, is organization. Who pays for the monitoring? Who is liable if the internet goes down? But the strategic value is undeniable. If we want to survive the staffing crisis, we have to treat patients at home.
That leads us perfectly into the outlook. We've seen the cool stuff, we've seen the potential, but I want to zoom out again.
The bigger picture.
Yes. Why should a policymaker driving to work right now listening to this care about medtech as a strategic priority, beyond just the obvious health is good argument?
That is the pivotal question. And the source material, particularly the GROW Plan, frames this as a matter of strategic autonomy.
Strategic autonomy. That's a geopolitical buzzword, usually applied to energy or microchips. What does it mean for medtech?
Think back to the early days of COVID-19. Do you remember the scramble for masks? For ventilators?
Vaguely. It was chaos. We realized we didn't make anything here anymore.
Exactly. We realized our supply chains were incredibly fragile and overly dependent on distant regions, specifically Asia. The argument now is that medtech is essential infrastructure.
Like energy.
Just like energy, just like defense. We need a strong local ecosystem, what they call reshoring, to ensure we have access to essential medical supplies when the next crisis hits. We can't be caught out like that again.
So it's a national security issue.
In many ways, yes, but it's also a massive economic opportunity. As we mentioned, these are high-value jobs. The GROW Plan cites a value added of approximately 183,000 euros per employee in the medtech sector.
That is significantly higher than the average job.
It is. These are knowledge-intensive, future-proof jobs. The Dutch ambition, outlined in the documents, is to be in the world's top 3 medtech ecosystems by 2035.
So this is a play for economic leadership.
As much as health leadership, yes.
Yes. And there's another concept mentioned in the Outlook sources that I found interesting, the 4P paradigm shift.
Yes, this is the philosophical shift we touched on earlier. The future of medicine is predictive, preventative, personalized, and participatory.
Participatory, what does that mean?
It means the patient is an active partner. not a passive recipient of care.
Like the remote monitoring we talked about.
Exactly. You are participating in your own care by providing that data. And MedTech is the enabler of this 4P shift. Without the devices and the data, 4P is just a nice philosophy on a PowerPoint slide.
It's just theory.
With MedTech, it becomes practical reality. It turns the theory into practice.
But I'm guessing there's a catch.
There is always a but. Innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. The sources stress the absolute necessity of ecosystems.
The triple helix mentioned in the Growth Plan.
Yes. Government, industry, and academia working together, intertwined. You can't just have a brilliant professor in a lab. You need a company to build the device. You need a hospital to test it. And you need the government to create the right regulatory framework and funding environment to let it all happen.
That's the convergence we saw at Erasmus, right? Engineers and doctors physically together.
That is the gold standard, breaking down the silos. Because if the engineer designs a robot that is technically perfect but doesn't fit in the crowded operating room, it's useless. Physical proximity and integration are absolutely key to success.
So we have covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from the staffing crisis to self-driving MRIs to bone scaffolds to the geopolitical strategy of supply chains. It is a lot.
It is a dense topic, but it's arguably the most important topic no one is talking about.
So if we had to boil this down, if our listener needs to walk into a meeting in 10 minutes and sound smart about medtech, what are the 3 things they absolutely must remember?
Okay, let's synthesize this into 3 key takeaways. Takeaway number 1, medtech is the capacity multiplier. We have to stop thinking of technology as just an add-on or a cost. In the face of the staffing crisis, the millions of missing nurses, medtech is the only viable solution.
The only one.
Automation, AI, and home monitoring are the tools that will allow us to treat the growing number of patients with the same or even fewer hands. It is the life raft for the healthcare system.
Okay, medtech isn't a luxury, it's the survival kit. What's number 2?
Takeaway number 2, the valley of death is real and dangerous. We have world-class research in Europe and the Netherlands. We are great at inventing things, but we are losing the race in commercialization.
Right.
Due to the slow and expensive regulations like MDR and a critical lack of scaling capital, innovations are dying on the vine or moving to the U.S. Policy needs to aggressively streamline this path from idea to impact if we want to keep these innovations and the companies and jobs they create here in Europe.
So great ideas, but we're terrible at getting them to the finish line. We need to fix the regulatory and funding bridges. And number 3.
Takeaway number 3, collaboration is key. Success requires physical proximity and integration. We need that triple helix: government, industry, academia. We need engineers in the operating room. We need ecosystems like the campuses in Eindhoven, Rotterdam, and Twente. We must break down the silos to compete with the massive integrated ecosystems in the US and China.
We're too small to work alone.
We are. It has to be a collective effort.
Capacity, commercialization, collaboration.
Yeah.
The 3 C's of medtech.
That's a very good way to remember it.
I like it. This has been fascinating. It's scary to think about the challenges, but also incredibly hopeful to see what's actually being built in these labs.
I agree. And I think I'll leave you with this final thought, if I may.
Please.
We often worry about whether technology will take our jobs. In healthcare, the reality is the opposite. We need the technology to do the work so the humans can do what only humans can do: provide care, empathy, a human touch. We have the technology to keep our healthcare system afloat. The question isn't, can we build it? We know we can. The question is, will we organize ourselves fast enough to deploy it?
A provocative question to end on. Will we organize fast enough? That's up to the policymakers, the researchers, and the innovators listening today. Thank you so much for breaking this all down for us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening. We will catch you on the next Deep Dive.